So we're outside one of the guys' houses who we're going to be interviewing. Now this person, he ended up in prison because he went to defend one of our sisters and ended up being in the riots between the Sikh and Pakistani gangs in the Chalvi in Slough area. He ended up in prison. Now this guy we are going to be speaking to is going to give you his perspective. Like I said, we're bringing you a series of these videos, and one of them is today. Basically this guy is going to be telling you all the history of his angle, his perspective of growing up in this predicament. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm just going to ask you a bit about the early 90s and what it was like growing up in those areas where, you know, in the south, where a lot of issues occurred with sexual grooming, and how we've always been raising awareness on this. But as in, you know, what sort of episodes did the Sikh community face in the 90s, and what was your experiences?
Yeah, basically I grew up in East London, and as I was growing up there was always trouble, like you get in schools with different gangs, but from a young age I noticed that a lot of predominantly Muslim gangs were active, especially in my school and against like Sikh boys. And I also noticed that a lot of them would be hanging around the schools, and like they were older boys, and they would be like, you know, basically talking to girls and stuff like that. But as I grew up, the issue started getting worse, and basically a group of boys from Birmingham come down, and they started to tell us that they faced these problems as well, but earlier on in the 80s and that. Yeah, so basically that's when Shere Punjab started in London, and it was basically to tackle this problem. There was a lot of like girls that were getting groomed, but in those days it wasn't social media. It was more like friends, younger brothers of like who were in classes with girls and introducing them to older boys, or like boys just hanging about in cars outside talking to girls, and it became a big problem.
How did you start raising awareness, or who were we talking to, and what were we doing to you know, address these issues?
Basically we had a talk by one of the guys in Birmingham, the local Buddha, who said, you know, they've faced these issues before and it's happening in London now. So a lot of the youth got together under the banner of Shere Punjab, basically just to like look out for our sisters and our brothers. We were raising awareness in a good light, just warning parents about what happens. Like, you know, like I said, in those days it wasn't social media, but it was still happening. Girls were still, you hear stories of girls getting groomed and then taken to Pakistan or sold off into prostitution. But it was like, you know, a much more, yeah, the police were aware about it, but it was much more like they used to class it more as a community issue. It's only when it started happening to like white girls did they give it a name and start calling it grooming. Mm-hmm. But basically, yeah, it was just going in a good light and just having a talk really, and raising awareness with the parents of what's going on, and just trying to unite the youth under one banner. So like, say if someone is getting bullied at school, we sort of look out for each other.
Yeah, as obviously tensions rose, and you know, there obviously sometimes, you know, we had to take, as a community, we had to take the law into our own hands because the system failed us, and they said, obviously, like you've said, they said it's a community issue and it's not their issue. They didn't understand it. Maybe they didn't realise it until many years after. I think the first conviction was 2005, but that failed us as a community. So, you know, how did we as Sikhs have to deal with that?
Yeah, as you said, the first conviction went till 2005, so this issue was going on since the 80s, so it was a good, 20 years that it was going on for, and the police weren't really bothered. We had to make a stand because no one was out there to help us, and at the end of the day, if you're getting attacked, it's our turn to fight back. Is our faith to like not take you know, being attacked. So it was more as a defensive measure, and basically, you know, there was gangs operating around East London, West London, that were notorious for like, you know, just going around basically beating up Sikh kids. You know, you hear stories all the time. So there's more of a defensive action against these groups.
How serious did the tensions and the clashes get to, and what did it result in? Obviously, it was tension and violence. We know this, but what was the extent of the violence? Was there you know, what was the worst situation you think you've been there?
It just escalated, like, you know, it became a tick for tack war, and basically on Vaisakhi you'd have like 300-400 Sikh boys come out. On the Eid you'll have the same, and then, you know, at events like Mele and stuff, it just used to be all out, like big gang fights going on, and it was pretty bad, you know. A boy got killed in Slough, a Muslim boy got killed in East London, so it did escalate up to guns and knife crime. So it was at one point really severe, and that was the point, like in the late 90s, that we got arrested. It was for a minor thing, but when we went court, because it was so big, the judge gave us a double the sentence to like make an example of us. So even though our situation we got caught for was minor, we did serve double the time, because that's how bad it was. They wanted to make an example out of us.
How bad? Obviously, the extent of it. What was the incident that led you to go to prison?
It was basically there was like a big conflict between a gang in Slough called the Charlie Boys, and it was basically they were attacking a lot of up in the Sikh kids at schools and stuff, and trying to convert Sikh girls, and we bumped into them when we were out one night, and basically a fight started, and we got caught by the police, and yeah, that was it really.
Obviously, you know, there was a lot of grooming and conversions going on, and forced conversions, and it was a very systematic way that they were attacking the Sikh community in those days, in the 80s and 90s. How did you ever how did the families or the victims or the survivors ever come forward and speak, and what sort of stories did you hear?
It became a point where they were like open about it. Like, you know, there was actually one time, I remember in Southall, they went door to door and handed out leaflets saying that, you know, that Sikhs have always been a problem with Muslims, and this is how to deal with them, and this is how to convert Sikh girls. We had incidents of, girls being kidnapped and raped. Also like forced conversions as well. Some girls sort of come back and told us, you know, like, they thought the guy loved them, and once they were married, they were like basically taken to Pakistan and used as prostitutes, and some of them just about got back. You know, some they'll take their passports off them so they can't get back. But luckily, you know, some of these girls come back to talk to us, and others sort of realised that, you know, it's just a false image that they portray, and the real thing behind it was just to like either convert them or use them as sex objects, really.
Obviously there was a lot of tension in the 90s and 80s, and even going as far as back as the 70s, we've heard of cases from the Sikh community, and you know, there's a lot of organisations and people that we had to take things into our own hand before, but going forward, you know, obviously, what do you think the solutions are there, that people know that we won't tolerate this at the same time, but going forward, solutions, we need to continue supporting all the Sikh organisations that are doing the proactive work in the community.
Yeah, organisations like Sikh Youth, you know, they're doing a good job. At the end of the day, like I said, you know, it's called grooming now because it suddenly started happening to white girls. So that's you know, and the police are dealing with it and looking into it, but it's still not, I feel in our community, it's still not, parents need to be educated on this. They need to learn that, you know, the sad thing is until it happens to your family, you don't realise what's happening. So raising awareness is still worse now, like I said, because you're on social media where your kid could be sitting at home and you don't know what they're doing. They could be saying they're doing their homework, but they could be talking to anyone. And kids are more vulnerable these days as well.
I think the situation is rife and it's out the roof right now, and you know, we need to do more. And obviously in the 90s, 80s, there's always been vigilante attacks took on by Sikhs and the Sikh youth and the Sikh communities because of issues like this, even going up to 2013 when 13 Sikhs in Leicester ended up in prison. So, yeah, you know, the Sikh community is going to probably, you know, we would always try to do as much as we can, but we've always suffered and we've been the most failed by the authorities?
Yeah, definitely. It seems to be like, you know, it's on one hand, you know, we're facing these issues and no one's helping us. And when we take matters into our own hand, we're getting punished severely for it as well. So it's as if there's no one there to help us. So the only thing I can say is, you know, unity is the key thing. Everywhere you always go, people always talk about unity, but it's still not happening. You know, people need to like face up to the reality and really, you know, like we're brothers and sisters. If this is happening, we should be concerned about it as our own daughter or sister. It's happening to you, not like what happens in our community. People look down at you or shun you away. But this needs to stop. Like we need to like really get united.
Definitely. Obviously, there's solutions in place, and as a community, we've suffered for 40 years. Moving forward, we're going to continue to do so. But we want to appreciate your time and letting the Sangha know about the experiences and what we faced as a community. Do you want to send any last messages to the viewers who'll be watching this?
No, that's like I said. You know, like unity is the key. Like, you know, we need to like get this, address this issue together as a community. We need to raise awareness as this is happening to our brothers and sisters. And without unity, you know, we're failing our sisters and our brothers. So we need to get united and really like tackle this issue together.
ठीक है, okay, वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह।